Migration, continuation of key issue 4. Content objective. Why do migrants face challenges? ICANN statement number 1. Explain the immigration policies from other destinations of immigrants from around the world. 2. Explain the European attitude toward legal and illegal immigrants. And 3. Explain how current European attitudes have demonstrated a source of irony. Here we look at a choropleth map, and we can see that within the dark green we see encourage more immigration in areas of the world where we see a rapidly developing economies, are known as the emerging economies, mostly secondary industrial jobs. So Eastern Europe, Russia, China, as well as Brazil. We can see areas where they maintain current levels, areas where they've had more policies or some stronger policies. And it's kind of interesting to look at Europe because there are areas of where they have strict policies like France and Great Britain, but in other areas they've maintained current levels. And then in other areas like Germany and Poland, they've encouraged more immigrants, as well as Northern European countries like we see here with Sweden, Finland, and Denmark. So an interesting contrast in the continent of Europe. When we look at European migration, we can see areas of where they're more tolerant or encouraging of immigrants, both Spain and Germany. In areas where they're less tolerant, that being France and United Kingdom, we see migrants coming in at a much smaller degree, or even like France, much smaller degree from Algeria, Morocco, and then United Kingdom from areas of Russia, China, and South Asia. So again, we see areas where the largest immigration found in Europe are they're more tolerant. If we go back to the previous choropleth map, Germany, Spain, and Italy. Concerns about Europe. Population growth in Europe is fueled by immigration. Remember, most European countries are in stage 4 or 5, so most of those countries were encouraging to immigrants to come across as guest workers. In fact, until recently, most immigrants were seen as very useful to the labor force, being that most of the countries were in stage 5. And then also urban areas such as like Berlin, Brazil, Brussels, or Paris or Zurich, they had many immigrants take on roles of bus drivers, collecting garbage, repairing streets, washing dishes. Again, very similar to jobs in the U.S., jobs that most people don't want. The guest worker programs were very successful in Europe. Remember, taking most migrants from northern Africa, as well as Turkey, as well as Southwest Asia, would migrate into Europe, and it formed in the 1960s and 70s. And it was a great example of circulatory migration, where immigrants would migrate for a short period of time, and when the work's done, they would migrate to their homeland. However, most of the guest workers decided to stay permanently in Europe, and then the government program began to diminish in the 80s, and it's been abolished today. But when we look at some of the concerns of Europeans, the biggest fear is the loss of culture, specifically religions, Christian religions, the language of the native country, and then also the foods and the cultural habits being diminished. There's been hostility in some parts of Europe, and it's been around political party. It's been centered on political parties. That one political party supporting immigrants and another party opposing immigrants. This is seen play out in many countries throughout Europe. And really the platform of those that are against immigrants blame immigrants for crime, unemployment, and high welfare costs. When we look at Western European countries, most notably Germany and Scandinavia, we again see a large number of immigrants that come into those countries, as already mentioned. We can also see a large number from Estonia. They get it from the other Baltic regions like Latvia, Lithuania, as well as Russia. All right, and so we can see the two political parties here in this picture. Up at the top are going to be supporting immigrants, and then at the bottom you see a political party that's opposing immigrants in Europe. So it's a contentious issue in Europe, much like the United States. And at this moment, it'd be nice to go compare European attitudes towards, as well as American attitudes towards immigrants. Again, two of the largest destinations of the flow of immigrant patterns we saw in earlier key issues. Europeans as immigrants, the inhospitable climate for immigrants in Europe is especially ironic, considering, as I already mentioned, with guest workers, but also Europeans were the large source of migrants in the 19th century. We go back to the United States, we go back to the 1600s, 1700s. The largest source of Europeans came from Great Britain. And then in the 1800s, we see in the mid-1800s, 1840s, 1850s, we get most of our immigrants from Germany as well as Ireland. And then we get into the late 1800s, and now we begin to see most of our immigrants from Northern European countries. And then in the 1900s to 1914, we see immigrants from Eastern and Southern European countries. Then we see the quota laws in the 1920s that give us, that allow mostly just immigrants from Europe, 24. Quota laws of 24, mostly immigrants from Europe. So we can even see in the 18th century and the 19th century, most of the immigrants in the world were European, which is a source of the irony of those that are opposed, or countries that are opposed to immigrants. Most Europeans fear, as I already mentioned, losing their culture. The Indo-European language, and that Indo-European language can be on several branches: the West Germanic, German, English, the two largest languages, or the Romance branch, which is going to be Spanish, Italian, Portuguese. Those are going to be languages that they're concerned about losing. And then Christianity is going to be most of the adherents from various branches, Roman Catholics as well as Protestant being the largest two branches. And then they fear losing their culture through their arts and music and literature. All right, that takes us to the end of notes. All right, at the end of notes, now you should be working on your Unit 2 test review.